My name is Erasmus. I am neither of royal blood, nor has the glory of my sword ever made its way into the verses of mighty bards, those immortal songs that echo through the ages. My name was lost among thousands, stamped with the seal of the ordinary and the forgotten. I was one of the countless nameless soldiers who marched behind Achilles on the blood-soaked, cursed, and tormented fields of the Trojan War. For 10 years, 10 long years, I buried a friend, a comrade, a brother every morning with the pale first light of the sun. I saw them die with my own eyes. I watched their bodies return to the earth, their souls rise to the heavens. I dug their graves with my own hands, and with each strike of the shovel, it felt like a piece of my soul was being torn away. Every night I lived covered in dust, dried blood, and the silence of the gods, a silence louder than the echoes of thousands of screams and groans, a silence that deafened me from within. When that great and cursed war, the one humankind should never forget, finally ended, I was among those who remained, a weary body, a shattered soul, but somehow, miraculously, still breathing. That breath felt less like a sign of victory and more like the mark of a curse. Achilles died, the invincible hero, the one even the gods feared, the warrior sung of in legend, was sent into eternity by a treacherous arrow to his heel, like a whisper fading into the void. His death was not merely the loss of a commander. It was the tearing away of a piece of the Achaean army's heart, the collapse of a belief, of a hope. The hope we carried on Achilles' shoulders was buried with him. And then Troy fell, that proud city we had besieged for years, whose every stone we had memorized, whose every corner we had bled in, crumbled piece by piece into ash. The once lively streets, the squares once filled with laughter, were now steeped in soot, blood, and death. The scent of burning wood mixed with the stench of burning flesh, a hellish aroma. Everyone shouted in victory, gave thanks to the gods, and rushed after spoils. But to me, the taste of victory was bitter, filled with grief, burning in my throat. Some memories, like embers buried beneath ash, thought to be extinguished and forgotten, reignite with the slightest breeze and scorch my soul anew. When I close my eyes, I see flames consuming homes, the blood from gaping wounds, the cries of the innocent, and the final breath of Theros, yes, the ever-smiling Theros, Kalen's friend. Those memories haunt my dreams like a nightmare, poisoning my sleep. When the war ended, everyone tried to return home. Even Odysseus, the cunning hero, embarked on his own long and painful journey. Some made it back, reuniting with their families years later, perhaps finding a sliver of peace and healing their wounds. Others were lost to the wild winds of the sea and the gods' cruel games, like Damon, now an unseen, forgotten ghost whose body lies in eternal rest beneath the waves. I stayed behind. I'm not sure why. My body longed to walk back toward Philia, toward the shade of the olive trees, but my soul felt stuck somewhere, left behind. There was a persistent emptiness in me, like an unhealed wound, a gnawing void that wrapped itself around my mind like a spider's web. This emptiness followed me like the shadow of an unknown truth. I wanted to return home, to the olive-scented soil of Philia, to my mother's warm bread, to my father's wise voice. But something held me back, as though an invisible yet powerful thread tied me to Troy, to that cursed land.
Last winter, on one of those misty days when cold winds blew down from the mountains, when the sea grew wild and waves crashed violently against the rocks, a merchant came to our village. He was a man from distant lands, well-traveled, full of stories and legends. Under the dim light of the inn, seated beside barrels of wine, he told his tales, his voice worn but filled with wisdom. A sailor from Argos, he said, had seen a very old, wise, and weary man in a tavern near the shores of Thea, Achilles' homeland, wearing around his neck a smooth, shining piece of bronze. Upon it were divine figures, etched as if straight from Homer's verses, images that seemed alive, as though the gods themselves were present. And at its center, a face that chilled the blood, filled with terror, yet strangely mesmerizing, the legendary visage of Medusa, a gaze that could turn stone cold, yet now it was merely a symbol. Medusa, terrible and divine. In that moment, something stirred within me. My blood surged through my veins as if a sleeping lion had suddenly awakened inside me. The merchant's words turned a long-forgotten rusted key in the locks of my mind, opening doors I thought sealed forever, stirring corners of my heart I had buried deep. That object he described, hidden beneath 1,000 years of legend, concealed in the songs of bards, something I never believed could truly exist, was Achilles' shield. According to legend, the shield was forged by Hephaestus, god of fire and craftsmanship, the most skilled artisan of Olympus, made specially for Achilles. It was not merely a weapon, but a reflection of the universe itself, of the sky, the earth, the seas, cities, war, peace, and life, a living world etched upon its surface. At the end of the war, when Achilles died, the shield was awarded to Odysseus as a prize for his cunning and wisdom, but also as a burden. And then it vanished. No one knew what happened to it. Some claimed it sank into the sea. Others whispered that the gods had taken it back. To me, they had always been mere myths, stories told to children, until I heard the merchant speak. That night, I could not sleep. Achilles' shield was all I saw in my mind's eye, its gleaming bronze surface, the divine figures etched upon it, the scenes from Homer's verses, and the cold yet strangely living stare of Medusa. In my mind, the shield was no longer just a weapon. It seemed to carry the weight of all the memories, sins, and curses of that war. Everything we had endured over 10 years, every scream, every loss, every hollow victory, felt etched upon its surface. And if it still existed somewhere, then the story wasn't over. Achilles' death, the fall of Troy, none of it was truly finished. That shield, I felt, carried the soul of the war itself, the whispers of the dead. I have grown old. The weight of years has worn me down, every bone aches, my legs tremble, my sword is rusted, a mere piece of heavy iron now. I can no longer march as I once did, nor wield my blade with skill, yet inside me still burns a fire, unyielding and unquenchable, a fire to track that shield. This is not a quest for glory, not a show of heroism, not a desire to earn a name. This is the pursuit of something missing, a way to fill the hollow the war left within me. This is a journey of facing the past, the ghosts of Troy, and most of all, the memories. Perhaps this journey is my attempt to find the conscience I buried long ago beneath the blood-soaked soil of that battlefield. Perhaps Achilles' shield is more than just bronze. Perhaps it is a mirror of lost souls, forgotten sacrifices, and buried truths. And I must face it, no matter how painful it may be. The merchant's words started a storm inside me. I could no longer sleep, could no longer eat, could no longer live as before. Everything felt meaningless. I was adrift in a void. I had only one purpose left. I will not die until I find Achilles' shield. This is not an oath. It is a call that rose from the depths of my soul, driving me forward on this path. I had to answer it. Otherwise, I would remain forever trapped among the cursed ashes of Troy like a ghost. This is my final task, my last duty to myself and to all those forgotten souls, and until it is done, I shall find no peace."
The next morning, I woke with a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in years, perhaps not since the very moment Troy's walls first began to crumble. This resolve breathed new life into my weary soul, gave strength to my exhausted body. For the first time in years, the morning sun streamed through the iron bars of my window like a whisper of hope. It felt as if every beam of sunlight was scattering the darkness in my mind, melting the ice in my heart. I had to go to Phthia. I had to pursue Achilles' shield. Perhaps the merchant's tale was nothing more than a myth, the drunken mumblings of an old sailor. But what if it was true? What if that shield still existed somewhere, forgotten like me, gathering dust in some lost corner of the world? Even the slightest chance was enough to make me breathe again, to pull me out of the drowning delirium I had long lived in. To me, that shield was more than just a piece of bronze. It was the missing part of my soul, the symbol of a conscience I had long lost. There was little to prepare. After all, for a soldier who survived a 10-year war, there wasn't much to hold on to. We once had chests full of spoils. Now we didn't even have a patch of land to our names. A few silver coins, just enough to buy bread and water along the road, an old but reliable dagger, and a small sack to throw over my shoulder. For this journey, there was no need to carry much. The heaviest burden was already within me. The flames of Troy, the screams of the dead, the final breaths of my comrades. My friends were long buried, their souls scattered to unknown lands. Our enemies were forgotten, their names no longer spoken. Yet I remained. I didn't know if that was a gift or a curse. The weight of it all was heavier than any armor I had ever worn. Before I left, perhaps to ease my conscience, I visited an old friend, Lysandros. He too had survived the hell of Troy and carried the same scars within him. He now lived in an olive grove just outside Phthia, spending his days tending the earth, trying to heal through the peace that only soil could offer. The signs of war were etched into his face, and the youthful spark in his eyes had given way to a profound stillness. I told him about the merchant's tale, about Achilles' lost shield and my decision to go after it. My words hung in the air, unanswered, as he listened silently. At first, a faint smile curled at the corner of his lips, perhaps amused, perhaps simply tired. "Erasmus," he said, his voice so fragile it seemed the wind might carry it away. "After all these years, going after Achilles' shield, what will it change? What will you prove? Who will care? These people have already forgotten the war. The taste of victory has long left their tongues, the grief of their losses buried deep in the soil. They believe everything ended when the war did. This is a dream chase, my friend." But then he fell silent. His gaze drifted far beyond the olive groves, over the hills of Phthia, toward the crumbled walls of Troy. For a moment, we both thought of the same things: the dead we left behind, the promises we made, the sins we committed, the wounds war left in our souls. The expression on Lysandros's face shifted. The trace of amusement faded, replaced with a quiet understanding. "And yet," he murmured, his voice softer now, warmer, "if that thing really is still out there, if the shield truly exists, perhaps finding it might bring you peace. Maybe it could fill that hollow space inside you. Maybe, maybe it could save us too." His eyes welled up, but no tears fell. As we parted, Lysandros handed me a small, worn pouch. Inside it was a piece of amber, smooth, warm, golden yellow. On its surface were faint lines, eroded by time, barely visible but still felt beneath the fingers. He said, "I once dreamed of placing this stone on Achilles' grave. Maybe then his spirit would have found peace. But now, let it accompany you. Perhaps it'll bring you luck, or maybe it'll simply serve as a reminder. Who knows?" The amber left a warmth in my palm, as if it carried within it an ancient soul.
And so, I set out. I walked through the narrow streets of the village, leaving the olive groves behind. I was alone. I did not join a caravan nor seek a companion. Yet within me, I carried Lysandros's friendship, his silent understanding, and the ghosts of the past. Most of all, I carried Tharos's voice. My feet led me to the wind-swept shores of Thrace, to one of the crowded harbors, bustling with traders, soldiers, and adventurers from across the world. From there, I would board a ship bound for Phthia, surrendering myself once more to the vast and merciless sea. But the sea, as always, had no patience. When I arrived at the port, the sky suddenly darkened. Gray clouds swept across the horizon like a shroud. Rain fell violently in torrents. The wind howled, shaking the masts and rattling the sails of docked ships. The storm held the harbor hostage. No vessel dared to set out. It felt like a sign, but of what, I couldn't say. Seeking shelter, I stumbled through the twisting alleyways of the harbor and found a small, dimly lit inn. Inside, unlike the storm's fury outside, there was heavy, suffocating stillness. I took off my soaked cloak and settled into a corner. By the fire sat an old sailor, his eyes as deep and tired as the sea, his face marked by countless storms. Our eyes met. In his gaze, I saw wisdom, but also sorrow. For a moment, I felt as if he had read the deepest secret of my soul. His voice was low, but each word struck like a hammer. "You too, one of those who came back from Troy?" There was no judgment in his tone, only quiet acceptance, as if he had read every wrinkle on my face, every speck of dust on my cloak, every scar on my soul. I simply nodded, the words caught in my throat. He took a sip of wine, then exhaled slowly. "I heard you're looking for Achilles' shield. Those who search for it always leave something behind. I've seen that look in the eyes before, the same longing, the same emptiness." I froze. His words hit me like plunging into a river of ice. How did he know my purpose? Who told him about the merchant's tale? Or had he simply read it in my face, in my broken hope, in the silence that clung to me? I saw the shadows of the past dance in his eyes. "Someone like you came here once, years ago," he continued, his voice now almost a whisper. "He was young, just like you. That same fire burned in his eyes. He believed, but he never returned. I knew the shield wasn't just a weapon to him either. It was hope. It was redemption." And then softly, but with certainty, I said, "Maybe it falls to me
to finish what he could not. As those words left my lips, I wasn't just speaking to the old sailor. I was speaking to myself, to that unrelenting void inside me. Perhaps this journey wasn't only about finding the shield. Perhaps it was about discovering the fate of that young man, the other seeker, and finishing the tale he left incomplete. The shield had become more than a relic. It now etched into my soul as a symbol, and I could not turn back.
It had been 5 days since I left Thrace, each one a trial no easier than the last. With every passing day, my body grew wearier, my steps heavier, the weight on my back more crushing. But the determination within me, the desire to find that shield, to soothe my conscience, only grew stronger, like an ember that refused to die. At times, I joined small caravans to protect myself from the road's uncertain dangers and to listen to people's whispers. I heard tales of those who had returned from Troy and the fates of the ones who had vanished. Other times, I walked alone, accompanied only by the sound of my footsteps and the wind's soft murmur. Each step I took, the shadow of the past walked beside me. The road led me to harsher, rockier lands. The paths narrowed, sharp stones dug into my soles. Trees became sparse, and bare cliffs took their place. In the distance, perched atop a mountain like an eagle's nest, I came upon the ruins of an ancient stone temple. This was no coincidence. I had chosen this path deliberately. In old tales and whispered rumors, it was said that this temple had once been dedicated to Achilles' memory, built as a tribute to his might and spirit. It was a sacred place where oaths of heroism were sworn, sacrifices were made to the gods, and prophecies were whispered. The temple had long since fallen under the cruel hands of time and war. The marble columns that once reached for the heavens lay shattered in heaps. Once glorious architecture, now reduced to rubble, a monument to ruin. The inscriptions had almost completely vanished, the sacred words and names of gods worn away by wind, rain, and forgetfulness. But miraculously, on one stone, defying all erosion and time, a single word remained clearly etched: Phthia. Phthia, Achilles' homeland, a name I had heard in childhood, spoken in epic tales, the land that had once filled my dreams, a cradle of warrior souls. At that moment, a feeling beyond words rose within me. It was a sign, without a doubt. This was not the path of chance. It was a road guided by the gods, perhaps by fate itself, or even by Achilles' spirit. A warmth spread inside me. That one word rekindled the fire within, strengthening my belief in my purpose. Seeking the shield was no longer a mere quest. It had become a pursuit of Achilles' legacy, a reckoning with his spirit. Just then, from the shadows of the ruins, an old priest approached with slow, weary steps. His face was carved with deep lines of time, his eyes as ancient and wise as the sea itself, as if they carried the secrets of 1,000 years. His long white beard danced in the wind, and with his sun-scorched, calloused hands, he was still trying to clear fallen stones and toppled columns, as if determined to keep the temple's spirit alive, to rescue its memory from oblivion. He came silently to my side. He stopped. His gaze drifted across me, as if trying to peer into the deepest corners of my soul. But in his eyes, there was no judgment, only deep understanding and compassion, the wisdom of years. "You seek something," the priest said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves, yet every word carried weight. "And what you seek is already watching you. Perhaps it has been, longer than you've known." I didn't understand. What I sought was watching me? Was this a riddle? A mad old man's rambling, or a prophecy? My thoughts swirled with confusion, but the seriousness in his eyes, the tight line of his lips told me these words were not idle.
Without waiting for a response, the priest turned and led me into a narrow, dim room in the back of the ruins, barely standing. Time had ravaged the space. The walls were cracked, and the ceiling looked ready to collapse. He pointed to a wall. There, almost entirely faded, was an old fresco, worn by time and dampness, but still visible if one looked closely. A battle scene. The walls of Troy engulfed in flames. Shades of crimson and orange still lingered. And in front of the blaze, standing tall and alone, was a man, Achilles, raising his shield to the sky. The designs on the shield, the face of Medusa, symbols of war and peace, were still striking. "This," said the priest, his voice now deeper, as if the past itself echoed in the room, as if Achilles' roar still hung in the air, "is not just the memory of a battle, but of an oath. That shield once stood for courage, for heroism, for invincibility. The one who carried it could bring entire armies to their knees. But now, people seek peace more than bravery. They want to forget the war, to mourn what they lost. That is why the shield was forgotten. Like Achilles' pain, like the fall of Troy, like the unhealed wounds war leaves behind. But it still exists. It lives on, in memory, in the depths of souls, in the whispers of the forgotten." I asked the priest if he knew where the shield had been taken, or where it might be now. I couldn't hide the excitement in my voice. My tongue nearly stumbled over the words. The priest gave no answer. He simply smiled, a wise, sorrowful smile. From a corner of the room, between piles of stone, he retrieved a small broken spearhead. Made of bronze, its surface was dulled with rust, but its shape remained intact. I could feel the power of Achilles still pulsing from it. There was a symbol on it, an ancient mark, a lion's head with a thunderbolt beneath it. It was the emblem of Achilles' lineage, representing his might, his divine origin. The priest held it out to me. I took it. I felt a chill spread from the cold bronze into my veins, as if a fragment of Achilles' soul, his final battle cry, had passed into me. "Let this guide your way," the priest said, his eyes locked onto mine. "It will point you forward like the stars guide sailors. But it is also a warning. Not every trace leads to truth. Some are laid to test you, to mislead, to turn you astray, to darken your soul. Belief comes easily, Erasmus, especially when despair clouds your heart. But choosing the right path is hard. To reach the truth, you must pass many trials, especially if what you seek is not just a piece of metal, but a reflection of your soul, your own conscience. When I left that place, I didn't just carry a clue, I carried direction. The spearhead had become my compass. I would head southeast toward the old lands of Mysia. The priest's words were carved in my mind, each sentence a seed planted deep in my thoughts. It was said that survivors from Achilles' warband once settled in those lands. Perhaps they knew the fate of the shield. Perhaps, like me, they carried the invisible chains of the war within their souls. Meeting them could offer not just a lead to the shield, but a chance to heal my own wounds. But within me, a growing unease had begun to stir. Something or someone was watching me. Along the road, I felt it, the sound of footsteps behind me, the whisper of branches, the shift of loose stones. Was it only the wind I heard, or the breath of someone in hiding? Each time I turned, I saw nothing. Only empty space, a deceptive silence. But the feeling had lodged itself deep in my mind, chilling my blood. I'm not alone anymore, I thought. Was it a threat or a sign of help? I couldn't tell. But one thing was clear. This journey would be far more dangerous and far more complicated than I had imagined. By the time I reached the rugged, harsh lands of Mycia, the season had already turned. The last warm breath of summer had vanished, giving way to the sharp, blade-like winds of autumn. The air had grown chilly, and the earth had taken on a somber shade of gray, as if it carried the weight of all that had been lived, all that had been lost. Even the sky seemed heavier, blanketed in leaden clouds that smothered the horizon. The mountain roads were narrow, rocky, and treacherous. With every step, the stones beneath my feet shifted, and at each bend I faced another precipice, another unknown. The small rocks rolling down from above seemed to echo the burden in my soul. Yet the spearhead the old priest had given me, the amber stone that burned like a hot coal in my palm, and the word etched in my memory, Phidia, all pointed clearly here. This land was not merely a geographical destination, it was a spiritual waypoint, a place for reckoning and confrontation. Ancient tales whispered that a few soldiers who had survived under Achilles' command had settled in these parts, bringing with them sacred relics from Troy, or perhaps cursed memories. The traces of what I sought were now here, in this silent, unyielding land. Each stone, each thicket seemed to whisper something to me, but their voices were lost to the wind, fading into indistinct murmurs. In the lonely mountains of Mycia, I came across a small, crumbling village, forgotten by time and men. The homes were made of stacked stones, ready to collapse at any moment. No children's laughter filled the streets. The village stood silent, like a ghost of the past. At the entrance, beneath the midday sun, I spoke with an old woman drying tobacco. Her face bore the harshness of a life long endured. She had only one eye, a deep scar marked where the other ones had been, perhaps a wound from war, or simply from life itself, one that time had never fully closed. Her back was hunched, her steps slow, but her mind stood firm. Her eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom, like the depths of the sea. When I whispered Achilles' name, it was as if I had uttered a forbidden word. She fell silent. A deep sorrow, a grief etched into her features surfaced. His name had awakened the pain and loss of the past. Then she turned her gaze toward the mountains, her eyes drifting far into the distance, beyond the horizon, as if beyond Troy itself. Years ago, she said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves, every word carrying the weight of stone. A stranger came here, alone, just like you. He had the same look in his eyes, the look of someone searching. His face was weary, his gaze haunted by the shadows of the past, as if his soul was still lost in the war.
He carried a large, heavy bundle wrapped in cloth over his shoulder, guarding it carefully. He never gave his name, never spoke to anyone, as if protecting a secret. But his eyes were the eyes of a man who had seen hell. And his hands, calloused, yes, but touched, perhaps, by a god's weapon, or maybe by a god himself. There was such a weight in his presence, in the burden he carried. You could feel it even from afar, as if he bore the weight of a mountain in his soul. I asked her where that man had gone, if I could still find him. The old woman, though she seemed to know the answer, slowly shook her head as if guarding a secret, protecting it from ill intent. "He's gone," she said, her voice mournful. "He could not stay. His soul was too restless. These quiet lands were too narrow for him. But he left something behind, not for us, but for the earth. Only the earth remembers Erasmos. The earth holds everything: wars, the dead, secrets, curses. It holds them all, and it never forgets."
Their words were riddles, but riddles that pointed toward clues. Outside the village, beneath the towering ancient shadow of an olive tree, its leaves full and heavy, its presence eternal, lay a slight rise in the earth, barely noticeable, but visible to a careful eye. The villagers spoke of strange noises at night from that very spot, whispers and moans the wind alone could not carry, as if the dead were speaking, or perhaps the earth itself was murmuring long-buried truths. When I stepped under the sacred shadow of that olive tree, I felt a strange pressure in my chest, unexplainable, suffocating. My heart pounded, my blood surged through my veins. It was as if beneath that tree lay not a secret, but a centuries-old sorrow, a soul offered in sacrifice. It felt like Troy's curse was buried here, together with Achilles' shield. I knelt and began to dig. The smell of earth filled my lungs, the scent of death and life intertwined. With my bare hands at first, the soil was soft at the surface, easily parted. But deeper down, it grew heavier, resisting me, as if trying to pull me in, fighting back. With every handful, I felt closer to the spirit of the shield. I could sense its ancient energy. Sweat rolled down my brow, stinging my eyes, but I did not stop. Eventually, my fingers touched cold, smooth metal. My heart froze. I scraped away more soil, and finally, a piece of bronze glimmered like a star beneath the sun, or an eye winking in the dark. The piece was round, etched with ancient inscriptions and divine figures. The verses of Homer came alive in my mind. There was no doubt. This was a fragment of Achilles' shield. Or had someone broken it, scattering its soul into cursed relics buried like offerings? My thoughts spiraled. Why had the shield been shattered? Who would dare such a thing? What power, what will could destroy a weapon forged by a god? Just then, in the sacred silence of that moment, when excitement reached its peak, a twig snapped behind me. The sound was so close, it sliced through my spine. A chill gripped my entire body. My heart thundered in my ears. I turned at once, my old but loyal dagger ready in the air, scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. Nothing. Only trees swaying in the wind, shadows dancing, leaves rustling. But that feeling, the certainty, consumed me. I was no longer alone. I could feel it down to my bones. Someone was watching me, up close, far too close. I could almost hear their breath, feel their heartbeat. This was no longer just a hunch. The vague feeling I had had since Thrace had become a solid truth. At night, I no longer lit fires, afraid the flame would reveal me. I stopped sleeping in the dark, eyes wide open, ears alert, listening to every rustle, every shift of stone, every breath of wind. I left no footprints, moved like a shadow. Yet no matter how careful I was, I occasionally heard them, the soft, determined footsteps of my pursuer, steps like those of a hunter. As if someone only wanted to follow where I went, see what I saw, discover what I discovered. Was it a priest, a messenger of a god, or a ghost seeking revenge, a leftover enemy from Troy bound by an oath of vengeance? I didn't know, but that uncertainty only deepened my fear. The mountains of Mysia were no longer mere paths. They had become a living maze that watched and waited. I clutched the fragment of the shield tightly. The cold bronze in my hand felt like both a warning and a source of strength. This journey had become far more personal than I ever expected. It was no longer a simple quest. It was a race against time, and I didn't even know who I was racing against. Was this follower an ally, a guide, or an enemy? What was their purpose? Were they seeking the shield as well, or were they after me? These questions spun a web in my mind. Perhaps the thing I had been searching for was the very shadow that had been following me all along. On the steep slopes of Mysia, beneath the sacred shade of an ancient olive tree, the tension I felt as I dug grew with every shovelful of soil. With each strike, the earth whispered its old secrets, and every handful of sand poured over me bore the weight of time. My hands were calloused, my fingers numb from the cold, sharp stones cutting into my skin. But I had no intention of stopping. A force beyond me was pulling me forward. It wasn't just the desire to find Achilles' shield. It was the need to fill that endless void within me, the hope to heal the deep wound the war had left in my soul. After long efforts, sweat, and hope, what I unearthed was far more than just a fragment. The first piece I found was a small section of the sacred circular rim of the shield. Though its bronze surface was covered in rust, it was adorned with ancient, unreadable inscriptions and shimmered faintly under the sun, as if it held a life of its own. When I lifted it, the earth beneath suddenly collapsed, revealing a stone slab, carefully hidden and covered in moss. This stone was no ordinary stone. It bore inscriptions carved in a language neither time nor dampness could erase. As my eyes wandered over the words, I froze in shock. It wasn't the Greek I knew and spoke. The letters and symbols carried traces of ancient Anatolian civilizations, predating even Troy. Hatti or Luwian, perhaps one of the forgotten languages of the Hittites or Luwians, or something even older, a tongue once whispered by the first humans. This shield was not merely a weapon. It was a sealed message, a riddle, a call from across the ages, and at its deepest core, perhaps a curse, a warning. Within me, fear and curiosity about the meaning of the inscriptions grew side by side, my heart pounding against my ribs. But the most surprising thing was the small stone chamber that opened beneath the slab. Hidden deep underground, long forgotten, unreachable by human eyes, the chamber was accessed through a narrow, dim passage, gloomy and damp. The air smelled of mold, but also carried the distinct scent of earth and history. Someone, long ago, had secretly transformed this place into a tomb, a resting place for a sacred relic, hidden from the world and evil hands. On the walls were faintly visible reliefs, worn by time but still powerful. They were less like artistic works and more like chronicles, records. The first relief, it could have been Ulysses, or any mortal hero in eternal struggle. The next showed a man receiving a gift from a descending god. He held Achilles' shield in his arms like a child, with utmost care. The final relief portrayed a wearied, collapsed figure clutching the shield to his chest. His face was gone, erased with time, but behind him burned a city, Troy. And within me, I felt an eerie familiarity with that faceless figure, as if I'd known him for thousands of years. It was like looking into a mirror. That warrior was me. The bearer of the shield was me. That exhausted figure was me. These reliefs told not just Achilles' story, but mine as well. The tale of the conscience I left in Troy, the innocence I buried. In the center of the chamber, resting on a low stone pedestal that nearly filled the entire space, lay the real shield in a dazzling silence. Corroded by time and damp soil, its surface was darkened, but it had lost none of its divine grandeur. The dust surrounding it only heightened its mystery. The sacred relic I had pursued for 10 years, that had filled my dreams and led me on this perilous journey, now stood before me in all its weight. At its center was a divine eye, crafted by Hephaestus himself. It seemed to see all the world's secrets, encompassing all time, watching the past and the future simultaneously. Around it, as if leaping from Homer's verses, were vivid scenes in motion. Bloody battles, brave heroes, farmers working in peaceful villages, lovers whispering, shadows of betrayal, dancing stars, rolling seas, the turning of seasons, birth and death. This was not just a weapon. It was a universe, Achilles' world. His entire life, victories and tragedies played out upon it. Perhaps this was humanity's destiny, the endless cycle of life, contradiction, and eternity.
My heart pounded like a drum, ready to burst from my chest. The spearhead and ember stone in my palm seemed to grow warm. I reached out. Just as my finger was about to touch the cold, rusty surface of the shield, at that sacred moment, someone appeared behind me. Suddenly, like a shadow, his presence filled the entire chamber. I didn't need to turn. I felt him in every fiber of my being. My soul had sensed his arrival. A man, bearded, like me, his face carved with deep lines of time and fatigue. He was not younger than me, perhaps older. His eyes burned like fire, red, scorching, yet filled with wisdom and endless sorrow. A sorrow like the weight of all the lost souls of Troy. He held no spear, no sword, no weapon, but his gaze struck like a god's, like a judge's. So heavy, it pinned me where I stood, took my breath away.
"Does it belong to you?" he asked. His voice was low, yet its echo filled the room, bouncing off the walls. There was no anger or kindness in his voice, only cold truth and acceptance. I couldn't respond. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. The words were knotted in my throat. I had faced the horrors of war, stood against thousands of enemies, but before this man I was speechless. Was this the shadow that had followed me since Thrace, or the young man the priest had spoken of, another seeker of the shield? He stepped closer. The flames in his eyes intensified. His face, half hidden in shadow, appeared ghostly. "This shield belongs to no one," he said, each word a seal. "It is a burden, a curse. The one who bears it must fight, not just enemies, but their own shadows, conscience, fate." A silence followed. All I could hear was our breathing and the wind's moan outside. His words struck my mind like hammer blows, each shaking my soul. Then he turned to me. The fire in his eyes burned deeper, as if diving into the depths of my spirit. "If you are still willing to carry it, be ready, because it has memory. The memory of thousands of years, countless battles, every drop of blood spilled, every scream shouted. Every scene engraved on it is etched into its soul, and you will carry those memories. They will never leave you. They will haunt your sleep, visit your dreams. Day and night they will be with you." I closed my eyes. A storm erupted within me. My entire past flashed before me like a film reel. Everything I had lived, everything in Troy, Lysandros's words, the priest's riddles, the shadow on the road, they all came together, merged. I had to make a choice. Either take up this burden, carry Achilles' memory, adopt a new curse, but also a new purpose, or leave this ancient relic behind and live forever with guilt, with the emptiness in my soul. It was not a choice. It was a fate, a calling. And I reached out and took it. When my fingers touched the shield's cold, rusty surface, it was as if 1,000 souls began to whisper all at once. A wave of energy surged through my body, sank into my muscles. The weight of the shield was far greater than I expected, not just physical, but spiritual, as if it bore all the sorrow of Troy. But I didn't hesitate for a moment. I had already made this decision within me, because someone had to carry this story. Not just that of Troy, not just Achilles, but humanity's story. What power brings, the price of victory, the voice of the forgotten, the whispers of the past, the hopes of the future. I, Erasmus, an ordinary soldier, a mortal whose name was never sung in epic tales, had taken on this great burden. Perhaps this was the final battle of my fate. From that moment on, I was no longer just a seeker. I was a bearer of the shield, the last guardian of Achilles' legacy, the carrier of his cursed past and perhaps his future. And that day, in the dim light of the stone chamber, beneath the weight of the shield, I understood. Some burdens are not chosen. Some burdens choose you. And in that moment, my life began anew, with the shadows of the past, a new purpose, a new fate. The feel of the shield's cold metal lingering on my skin. The mysterious man had vanished, like a ghost, silently. But his words still echoed within my soul.